Untitled Tire.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, going off the beaten track to find solutions.
Back at the Game City race headquarters, it was again time for post-mortems, with QUINTIN happy with his day at the office.
We had a good time trial. We didn't take it too, we didn't push too hard in the start. You know, we slowly worked our way into a good rhythm, and I think it's important not to take too many chances so early on in such a long race. So yeah, the strategy worked out nicely for us, and we had a clean run, which was nice for a change.
Apart from a few niggles, Nick Harper was also a satisfied customer.
Time trial was good. It's my kind of racing. It suited our car. I just didn't like the stops where we had to drive at 60 k's an hour and stop and go. There was like 3 of them in there, so it just disrupted the flow. But other than that, we had a good time trial.
There were also no complaints from prologue winner Colin Matthews.
We drove as fast and as hard as we possibly could. That's what it takes to win a prologue these days. My navigator did a great job. The route was tight. Then it had some really open fast sections where we had a really close call. But tomorrow's going to be great fun because we've got a minute-and-a-half gap over the second car. And it's going to have lots of fun. We've got 230 k's to GSP, another 230 k's to the end of the race tomorrow. So there's definitely a big race on.
The off-road community did not miss out on sunrises, and crowd favourite Hannes Grobler was in early demand.
Hello, Hannes, how's it?
How's yourself, man?
I'm good. How are you?
That's very good.
There was plenty of early activity as teams readied themselves for what promised to be a tough day. There was no shortage of pre-race optimism, and while local hero Atang Makakhanene carried the hopes of a nation on his shoulders, he was adamant there was no pressure.
There's actually no pressure. I'm actually quite confident and comfortable with all the people around me and the support that I'm getting back at home. And I won the race, yes, in the past. But so far, we're learning the car. It's a new car, it's a new navigator, everything I'm not used to, and I'm also trying to get my mind back on the track. So there's a lot to be put together in terms of having a proper package. But since the trials yesterday, the car seemed to overheat it a little bit, but I think it's okay. We had a bit of bubble in the water cooling system. So it should all hold today, and we make it to the end. We'll make up a couple of places.
The Toyota Botswana Kalahari Desert Race is the biggest sporting event in Botswana.
Absolutely important. It's one of our icons in our calendar. For tourism, it brings all roads lead to Gaborone, Botswana, and that is fantastic for my hotels in Gaborone. From the point of view of Botswana in particular, exposure to the international community about our capacity to do what we can. Thirdly, for the general communities that the race goes through, the communities benefit from the people that are aligned along the track.
The Botswana Tourism Board also plays a major role in staging the Toyota 1000 Desert Race. The board hosts VIP guests from Botswana and South Africa, and excitement started to grow as the start approached. Colin Matthews and Alan Smith blasted off the line, with Jimmy Zaas and Stefan Kutsia in hot pursuit, and hostilities had commenced.
Next to join the fray was the Atlas Copco bat of Nick and Ryan Harper, and with the prologue dominated by special vehicles, the first 11 cars to be flagged away would all be specials. ABSA off-road races are run on what is termed real time, with cars leaving the start according to their prologue times. The Harpers had a 14-second start on Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar in the CR1, with the RFS Toyota Hilux of Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst and the Donaldson Nissan Navara of Hannes Grobler and Joan Moore in the first production vehicles to come under starters' orders. They were followed by Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman, and it took only 200 meters or so to whip the crowd into a frenzy.
Dakar rally heroes Ivar Tollefson and Quinn Evans were given a warm send-off in one of 3 factory Donaldson Nissan Navaras, and there was a huge cheer when Atang Makakhanene and Philip Archinall took off alongside the Unifreight Ford Ranger of Kobus van Tonda and Rian Guapa.
Spectators were 2 and 3 deep along sections of the route, with the 2-century racing entries in the hands of Colin Matthews and Alan Smith, and Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar setting the early pace. Corbett is a former desert race winner, but there were question marks over the reliability of the CR1. A little further back, Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman had caught Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst in the RFS Toyota Hilux. Passing was a risky proposition, unless there was cooperation from the crew in front.
Similar little duels were starting to develop throughout the field, and with conditions favouring the special vehicles, the experienced Visser and Badenhorst took the first available opportunity to politely move aside and let Hutchison and Bergman go past.
Conditions were often akin to driving through a tunnel of thorn bushes, and there were ominous signs of an inordinate amount of water and mud along the route.
Jimmy Zaos and Stefan Coetzee had lost early ground in the Mountain Dew Porter and were being closed down by Nick and Ryan Harper in the Atlas Copco Bat. They had Hannes Schrobler and Johan Moore hot on their heels, with the Nissan crew quickly making up a couple of places. They'd moved ahead of Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau and Herman and Wichard Sulwald in the Sulwald Racing Zarko. One Sulwald car was being chased by another Sulwald car, and right on their heels were Naheem Mosaji and Mohammed Molson in the Tyre Rack Jimco. It was hectic stuff, but there was trouble ahead.
There were stretches of mud and water unheard of on the Toyota 1000 Desert Race, and among the early victims of one such mud hole were Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson in the Regent Racing Bat. While they floundered, Hannes Schrobler and Johan Moore streamed past to pick up another place.
When Don Thompson and James Watson put in an appearance, the scene was set for a little tragi-comedy, with the enthusiastic crowd getting more than their money's worth. Backing up to take a run at the mud hole, Thompson reversed into the Ruricon Bat of David and Gary White.
The response from the Whites was to back up and drive around the Zarko and plough through the mud, while the KwaZulu-Natal crew were left to rue some extensive exhaust damage.
Can't stick the jack and then you can leave it out.
You need a rearview mirror.
That's all mud on there.
Ichu and Jaap de Bruin were making good progress in the Micro and Excel Toyota Hilux, but for the crowd at the mud hole, some more entertainment was on its way. The Whitehouse Carlson car was still stranded, and George and Sharon Barkhuizen were the next victims.
The Besaidnotes were busy floundering when the Castrol Toyota Hilux of Hein Lateghan and Chris Birkin and the KEC Bat of Johan van Staden and James Rousseau arrived on the scene, and in a huge spray of mud and water took the direct route.
With help from a little contact with a stricken Toyota, the Bat ploughed its way to safety.
After starting 28th on the road and 13th in the production vehicle category, Duncan Foss and Rolf Pitchford arrived at the river crossing to find the direct route blocked by a stranded Atlas Copco Toyota of Gary Berthold and Dani Stassen. A little improvisation was needed, and the pair set off downriver in search of an escape route.
Little mountaineering saw the Donaldson Nissan Navara crew safely out of the riverbed, with finding a way back to the route proper the next exercise. Overseas commitment saw Pitchford miss the 07 and 08 races, and when it was confirmed he would be available for this year's race, Foss heaved a huge sigh of relief and thanks.
Safely back on the route, Foss and Pitchford went past the RFS Toyota Hilux of Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst, who were temporarily hors de combat after solid contact with a tree.
There were sections of the route that were in keeping with conditions you would expect on a desert race, and Kobus van Tonde and Rian Guapa were making steady progress in the Unifreight Ford Ranger. Van Tonde and Guapa started 25 seconds ahead of the factory Ford Ranger of Neil Woolridge and Kenny SKJOLDHAMMER, who were not about to try any early race heroics in a vehicle still very much in the development stage.
Up at the now infamous mud hole, help was at hand for Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson.
Whitehouse and Carlson were towed to safety, but within seconds their place in the mud had been taken over by Thomas Rundle and Stavros Ioannakos, who drove straight into trouble in the diesel twin-turbo Ford Ranger.
Next up were Class E frontrunners Picky Labuskaghni and Rikus Erasmus, who looked as though they would join Rundle and Ioannakos.
The mud played havoc with clutches and, of course, engines, but they managed to back up in the 4x4 Megaworld Toyota Hilux, and a slightly different tack the second time round saw them, much to the delight of the crowd, safely on their way.
Back on dry land, Herman and Wichald Sulwald were back on song after losing 40 minutes through a loose coil wire and a brake problem. They were staying ahead of Graham Leith and Mike Lawrenson, who were having a steady run in the Transcorp Ford Ranger. But Higo and Jaap de Bruin had come to a halt.
The stop axle broke in front. You see in there. So we're trying to fix it.
A puncture ruined the prologue for Class B champions Johan and Etienne Besaidnout in the Adenko Bat. They were going well, and despite an electrical problem, were starting to pick up places.
Back at our mud hole, the unfortunate Thomas Rundle and Stavros Ioannakos were sinking deeper and deeper into the mire. Attempts to haul them out of their predicament were not meeting with much success. And to rub salt into their wound, a string of cars led by the back-in-action Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst ploughed their way through the obstacle without any undue problems.
Next up were Terence Marsh and Peter Groenewald in the Regent Racing Nissan Navara.
Class E championship leaders Dion Venter and Ian Palmer had a long look at the situation and then sailed through it safely.
Venter and Palmer were followed by Class D leaders Dewald van Breda and Johan de Tooy in the Northam Toyota Hilux D4D, and Class E champions Jannie Visser and Joks Leroux in the RFS Toyota Hilux.
The mud hole continued to provide entertainment, with Warwick Goossing hamming it up for the crowd after a quick inspection of the dangers ahead. While reinforcements were being called up to help Rundle and Ioannakos, the resourceful Louw de Bruin and Rian Greylen took a detour around the mud hole in the Rurikon Ford Ranger. They were followed by Ernest Corbett and Warwick Goossing in the futuristic-looking Century Racing CR2, with the Rundle Ioannakos Ford still going nowhere.
There was now a change in tactics to try and put an end to the Rundle Ioannakos problem. The Ford crew had lost mountains of time, and their sense of humour and even the spectators were starting to lose interest. In dustier circumstances, Castrol Toyota crew Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton were on a charge after losing 40 minutes stuck in 2 mud holes.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, overcoming all obstacles.